Right, so let's look at the last part of this series for this application. And this will be when we click on an item in the list view or in this recycler view then, and we want to show the text there. Also, if we want to add a new person to the list, we're going to enter the data and click on add person and show it in the list. So let's start with the first thing on how to do the click event here so that we can set data on that part. So we'll need to go back to our list frag. And inside of the list frag, we will create, or not inside of the list frag, let's go to person adapter. In the person adapter, we will create an interface. So I'm going to say public interface item clicked. And then on that interface, we're only going to have one method there, and we're going to call it on item clicked. And the only thing we want to pass through is an index value. So on item click then, we want to have our main activity actually implement this item clicked. So let's go to the main activity, and we're going to say on the main activity, implement item clicked. And that will be of the person adapter's item clicked. Now Alt enter on that error and implement the method. And we select that one method called on item clicked. So as soon as the user clicks then on an item, we want to have this interface talk back to the main activity to tell us where was that one clicked. So how do we do that? So the main activity is now implementing that item clicked, and it's got the method. Now in the person adapter again, we created the interface. So I want to create an interface variable here at the top. So it's going to be item clicked. Let's call it activity, because this will be a link to the main activity. So item clicked activity. Now inside of this person adapter, the context that was passed in, if you look at your list frag, the context that we passed in there is this.getActivity, which is ultimately referring to the main activity again. So if I'm going to say the context, I'm actually saying it's the activity that is using this fragment now. Okay, so now in this case, we're just going to say activity equals. Now I'm going to convert this activity to an item clicked and refer to context. So context is now the main activity. So the main activity gets converted to an item clicked. Can we convert it? Yes, because it implements item clicked, so no problem there. And activity now has got a connection to the activity called main activity. So when we click on an item, we will go into this method and call activity, which is a link now to the main activity. And there's one method called on item clicked, which is this method on item clicked. And we need to pass through now the index where it was clicked. So for this, we need to get this tag that we set there. So I'm going to say people.index of, we want to get the index of this tag, this object that we set there when we set up every item in the list view. So where it is clicked, we need to get that object. So I just need to go to this view that was passed in and call get tag. So that returns back to me the specific person object that was clicked. And just to make sure, we will cast this to a person object. Right, so this gives me then the index of where in the list did we click. It passes through that index to this item clicked, and now we can do something with it. So in this case, we've already declared, remember on, let me just quickly have a look at your main activity. On the main activity, if we make this landscape, we have the text view and the text view there. So that is on fragment detail. So that text view was called TV name. This text view was called TV tel. And it's been already declared there as TV name and TV tel. So the only thing we can do here is to just set the data to it for that specific one that was clicked. Right, so we called it TV name. So I'm going to say TV name.setText. Now, where is that array list of mine? It's in the application class. So I'm going to say application class.people. So I'm referring to this application class where we created this people. So wherever that one is now, I'm going to say people.get the index where it was clicked. We pass through the index. That gets me the object, and from the object I want to get the name. So let's do the same for the TV telephone number there. We're going to say set the text to the application class dot people, that's the array list, dot get, passing in the index, dot get telephone number. So let's test out this one quickly and see if it works. Right, so there's the list view again, or the recycler view. If I click on John Rambo, all the data is set. Nelson Mandela, Chuck Norris. So everything works fine. Now, did you see that when we started this application, we had text view there. So let's just quickly make sure that that one will work. So inside of the onCreate, right at the end, I'm just going to call this on item click method, this one, and I'm going to pass in the index of 0 there. So let's run it again. All right, so there's running. Let's just see if we can have that list view already at item 0. Chuck Norris, 100% correct. Right, so this part now works 100%. The next part we want to do is then to get to this part where we get the person's name and telephone number, add the person, and then see if we can show it in the list. So you'll remember that we've set up this button there as btn add.set on click listener. So if we click this, we want to get the name and the telephone number and add a new person object. So how will we do that? First thing we can do there is to first make sure that the user typed both fields. So remember we called them etName and etTel. So I'm going to say if etName.getText.toString.isEmpty. If it's empty, or etTel.getText.toString.isEmpty. So if any one of the two is empty, which means that the user did not type anything there, we will just show a toast to the user, telling the user, please enter all fields. The else part will be everything went fine, and we've got the name and the telephone number, and now we can create a new person object. So now in order to do this, I need to go back to the application class. In the application class is my people array list. So I want to add that new person now to this array list. So if we go back to the main activity, we will go and say application class.people.add. What do I want to add? Well, I want to add a new person object, but this person object must accept the name. So how do we get the name? We go to the edit text, etName, we get the text, not the transition name, get the text dot toString, and then on that we can call trim, and that you see there, that's fine. And then the second argument will now be the telephone number, and that we get from etTel.getText.toString.trim. I think I've got one bracket maybe missing there. Yeah, we've got one bracket missing there, and then it should be fine. Okay, so in the application classes array list, we add a new person object, etName and etTelephone number, whatever the user typed there, and that's a new person. But now that application class.people.add, if we do that, we are only adding it to the array list. We're not adding it actually to the list view. So now, before we get to that, let's just tell the user that this was successful. Let's say person successfully added. We can then go to etName, and we can set the text to null, just to be able to add another person again, and go to etTel and also set the text to null to be able to add another person. Right, so now the next part that we want to do now is to let the list view in the list frag know that something changed, that your application class.people that we passed in now changed, and it must update the adapter or update the recycler view there. So we're going to add one method right at the bottom in this class called listFrag. And I'm going to say this one is public void. I'm not going to return anything, but I want to call this method, you can call it anything you want. So I'm going to say notify data changed. So just to notify this class that the data has been changed, we're going to go to calling the adapter and call notify dataset changed. So there's a method that comes with the adapter that's called notify dataset changed. So we're going to call from the main activity this method called notify data changed, and then this method will go to the adapter and tell the adapter that your data is changed inside of the list. So this notify dataset changed is the method that is actually setting now the new data to the list view or to the recycler view. So how do we call this method now inside of the list frag right from the main activity? So for this, we need to go and set up a new variable at the top. Now this variable will be of type list frag. So I'm going to say list frag, and let's call it list frag there also. So just to get a hold of this list fragment that we have there. We also need to get a fragment manager so that we can get hold of that fragment. So I'm going to declare it as Fragment Manager. Let's just call it Fragment Manager as well. And then inside of the onCreate, let's set up that Fragment Manager quickly. I'm going to say Fragment Manager equals this dot get support Fragment Manager, just to get the Fragment Manager of this specific activity. And then we can now refer to that list fragment. So I'm going to say list frag equals cast it to a list fragment, and we're going to go to the Fragment Manager dot find the fragment by its ID. And then the fragment that we are looking for is, if you go to your fragments quickly, where we had it on the activity main XML. So if we go into text, you will see that we have fragment, we call it fragment 2 and fragment 3. So this one is the detail frag. So let's just make that ID detail frag, and we make this ID add person frag. So if I want to refer to the detail fragment, it will be called detail frag and add person frag. And then the last one there is the one that we actually want to get hold of. And this is the list frag. So let's just call it list frag there. So if I want to get hold of that list frag, okay, so this one must just be list frag also. All right, I think now all the errors are gone. So actually we only need this ID there for the list fragment. So now if we go back to the main activity, I want to refer to that ID. So it's going to be r.id.listFrag. Right, so now we actually have a connection to this list fragment. So by just saying Fragment Manager equals get support Fragment Manager, on the Fragment Manager we find a fragment by its ID, and the ID is called list frag. So now we have a connection to the list frag. And on this connection we want to call notify data changed. So go back to the main activity. Then after everything has been done successfully, we're going to say list frag dot, and you can see we've got that method notify data changed. So let's see if this works now. I'm going to run this, say OK, and let's see if it runs. Right, so there we've got the items in the list. Let's enter a new person there. Let's say Peter Pollock. Say next. And then the telephone number, let's make it anything there. Say done. So now the data is entered. If I click on add person now, it adds that person to the list, successfully added, and I can now click on that person to also show the data. So I hope that you've learned something from this video on how to basically communicate between fragments, and also how to add a recycler view to your fragments.